The Viking honor culture, while sometimes brutal, provided clear psychological guidelines that may have actually improved sleep quality. When your culture has clear rules about right and wrong, and when you've lived according to those rules, sleep comes easier. The concept of Drengskapper, the way of the worthy man, provided a clear behavioral code. You defended your family, kept your word, showed hospitality to strangers, and faced challenges with courage. Simple rules, clearly understood. Compare this to modern ethical complexity, where every decision involves weighing multiple competing values, considering diverse perspectives, and navigating relativistic moral landscapes. This complexity, while perhaps producing more nuanced ethics, creates decision fatigue and moral uncertainty that plague modern minds at bedtime. When Bjorn the trader lay down to sleep, he could review his day against simple criteria. Did I keep my word? Did I protect my family? Did I act with courage? If yes, sleep came with clear conscience. The modern person reviewing their day faces infinite complexity. Was I authentic? Did I maximize my potential? Am I living my best life? The questions multiply endlessly, and sleep retreats. The berserker exception. When warriors couldn't sleep. Not all Vikings slept peacefully. The sagas mention berserkers, warriors who entered trance-like fury in battle, often suffering what we now recognize as PTSD symptoms, including sleep disturbances. But Viking culture had mechanisms for dealing with warrior trauma. Ritual cleansing after battles. Warriors underwent purification rituals. These ceremonies, involving water, fire, and specific prayers, served psychological functions similar to modern trauma processing. Storytelling. Therapy warriors were expected to tell their battle stories, transforming raw experience into narrative. This process, which modern therapy recognizes as crucial for trauma integration, happened naturally in Viking culture. Time in nature troubled warriors might spend time alone in wilderness vision quests that allowed psychological processing away from social pressures. Herbal support, as discussed earlier. Stronger sedative herbs were available for those whose minds wouldn't quiet naturally. Importantly, battle-related sleep disturbance wasn't seen as weakness or permanent condition. It was understood as natural response to extreme experience, treatable through time and appropriate interventions. The power of purposeful exhaustion. Viking psychology benefited from the interaction between physical exhaustion and mental state. When bodies are genuinely tired from meaningful work, psychological defenses naturally lower, allowing emotional processing that might otherwise be resisted. Evening exhaustion created vulnerability, but safe vulnerability within family and community. Tears came easier, laughter more readily, truth more naturally. This emotional fluidity, facilitated by physical tiredness, prevented the emotional constipation that creates modern insomnia. The kinds of repetitive physical tasks common in Viking life rowing, grinding grain, spinning thread-induced light trance states where psychological processing happened below conscious awareness. Unlike modern exercise, performed while listening to podcasts or watching screens, Viking physical work allowed minds to wander, process, integrate the absence of clock time. Vikings lived by natural and task time rather than mechanical clock time. You woke when your body was ready or when duties demanded, worked until tasks were complete or daylight failed, slept when darkness and tiredness coincided. This natural rhythm eliminated one of modern life's greatest psychological stressors, time anxiety. No Viking lay awake calculating, if I fall asleep now, I'll get 6 hours. They simply slept when tired and woke when rested. The absence of precise timekeeping extended to longer scales, without calendars marking exact ages, appointment schedules extending months ahead, or 5-year plans demanding achievement. Vikings lived more present-focused lives. This presence, what mindfulness meditation attempts to recreate, came naturally from their temporal environment. Spiritual security. Whether following old gods or new Christ, Vikings possessed spiritual frameworks that provided psychological security. This wasn't necessarily deep theology. Most Vikings probably had fairly simple religious views, but they had them, and they provided comfort. The Old Norse religion, with its emphasis on fate and cosmic order, provided explanations for suffering and frameworks for understanding life's mysteries. Christianity, as it spread, offered different but equally comforting narratives of divine providence and eternal life. Modern secular culture, whatever its intellectual advantages, has largely removed these psychological comforts without replacing them. We face existential questions alone, without cultural consensus on meaning or purpose. This philosophical isolation creates anxiety that follows us to bed. Vikings didn't have all the answers, but they had socially accepted answers that provided psychological resting places. Whether invoking Thor's protection or Christ's salvation, they could release ultimate responsibility for their fate to higher powers, a psychological move that modern autonomous individuals find difficult, but that greatly facilitates peaceful sleep. The integration of shadow. Carl Jung wrote about the dark aspects of personality that must be integrated for psychological health. Viking culture, with its acceptance of violence, death, and darker emotions, naturally facilitated this integration. Vikings didn't pretend they were purely good. The same man who tenderly cared for his children might kill enemies without remorse. The woman who healed with herbs might curse those who wronged her. This acceptance of human complexity prevented the psychological splitting that creates modern anxiety. When you accept your capacity for darkness, when you know you could kill to protect your family, could be cruel to survive, could prioritize your clan over strangers, you don't lie awake wondering if you're a good person. You know you're human, capable of the full spectrum of human behavior, choosing daily which aspects to express. This integration of shadow didn't make Vikings more violent. If anything, it may have made them less randomly aggressive than modern people who repress all darkness until it explodes unexpectedly. Acknowledged darkness can be managed. Denied darkness controls from the unconscious. The storytelling cure. Perhaps no aspect of Viking psychology was more important for sleep than their storytelling culture. Stories served multiple psychological functions. Meaning-making stories transformed random events into meaningful narratives. Your suffering wasn't pointless if it could become a tale that helped others. Emotional processing. Hearing stories of others facing similar challenges normalized difficult emotions and provided models for coping. Cognitive closure stories have endings. Unlike modern binge-watching that deliberately creates cliffhangers, Viking tales provided resolution that allowed minds to rest. Identity formation. Knowing your family stories your cultural myths, your place in ongoing narrative provided stable identity that reduced existential anxiety. Future projection stories of heroes overcoming challenges created positive expectations that reduced anticipatory anxiety. The evening storytelling session served functions similar to modern therapy: externalization of problems, normalization of struggles, provision of coping models, creation of meaning. But it happened naturally, communally, without pathologizing normal human struggles. Lessons for anxious moderns. Viking psychology offers insights for modern sleep struggles. Accept what cannot be changed. Develop genuine acceptance of uncertainty and mortality. Create evening rituals. Establish calming transitions from day to night. Activities. Process. Emotions fully express rather than suppress difficult feelings. Seek community. Support. Share struggles rather than ruminating alone. Find life purpose, clear values, and meaningful work. Reduce existential anxiety. Embrace natural rhythms. Allow mood and energy to vary with seasons. Limit choices. Reduce decision fatigue by accepting constraints. Practice presence. Focus on today's tasks rather than endless future planning. Tell stories. Transform experiences into narratives that can be integrated and released. Make peace with shadow. Accept the full spectrum of human capacity. The Vikings achieved something remarkable: psychological resilience in a genuinely dangerous world. They faced real threats: starvation, violence, disease, yet apparently slept better than we do in our safe, comfortable beds. Their secret wasn't denial or ignorance. They were fully aware of life's dangers and difficulties. Instead, the lost art of Viking sleep, when darkness was our greatest ally. Prologue. A letter to the sleepless. Picture this moment with me. It's the depths of winter in 10th century Norway. Outside, the world has disappeared into a darkness so complete it feels like a living thing. The wind howls across the fjords, carrying the scent of snow and salt. Inside a long house, built from massive timbers that have weathered 100 winters, 20 souls share the warmth of a single hearth. The fire has burned low, reduced to glowing embers that cast dancing shadows on walls blackened by generations of smoke. On raised platforms that run the length of the building, entire families sleep together: grandparents, parents, children, servants, their bodies creating a landscape of gentle rises and falls beneath thick woolen blankets and bear furs. And here's the remarkable thing that should make us moderns weep with envy. They are all sleeping deeply, peacefully, naturally. No one lies awake calculating how many hours remain until dawn. No one reaches for a glowing screen to check the time. No one's mind races with tomorrow's anxieties or yesterday's regrets. They simply surrender to the darkness with a trust we've forgotten how to feel. We, the anxious inheritors of industrial progress, the champions of conquered darkness, the proud owners of sleep-tracking apps and white noise machines, have lost something profound. We've gained the world but lost the night. We've mastered wakefulness but failed at rest. This is the story of what we've lost. More importantly, it's the story of what we might still reclaim. Chapter 1. The Symphony of Two Sleeps. The Dance of Darkness. The Vikings didn't fight the night. They danced with it. In our modern world, we approach sleep like a battle to be won. 8 hours of continuous unconsciousness, that's the holy grail, the metric by which we judge our success or failure as sleepers. We lie in our temperature-controlled bedrooms, on our scientifically designed mattresses, minds racing as we try to force ourselves into unbroken slumber. When we wake at 3 a.m., we panic. We failed. We're broken. We reach for pills or phones, desperate to return to the unconsciousness that eludes us. The Vikings would have laughed at our anxiety not cruelly, but with the gentle bewilderment of adults watching children fear the dark. They knew something we've forgotten. Human sleep isn't meant to be a monolith. It's meant to be a conversation. First sleep, the descent. As darkness claimed the Nordic landscape, and in winter, it claimed it early, and completely Viking households would begin their evening ritual. The Icelandic sagas speak of this time with a casualness that reveals its ordinariness. This wasn't a special ceremony. It was simply what happened when the sun abandoned the world. After the day's final meal, eaten by firelight, as shadows grew long, families would gather around the central hearth. The Old Norse term was fyrirfein, first sleep, and it came as naturally as breathing. Picture Thorvald the shipbuilder, his hands still aching from a day of shaping oak planks. As full darkness arrives, perhaps only 4 hours after what we would call afternoon, he settles onto the sleeping platform he shares with his wife, 3 children, and elderly mother. The younger children nestle between their parents like cubs seeking warmth. His mother, wise in her years, takes her place near the wall, wrapped in the wolf pelt that was her bride gift 50 winters ago. There's no discussion about whether it's bedtime. The darkness has spoken, and they listen. For the next 4 hours, they sleep with a depth we modern humans rarely achieve. This isn't the fitful, anxiety-riddled unconsciousness we call rest. This is the sleep of people whose bodies are genuinely tired, whose minds aren't buzzing with blue light stimulation, whose circadian rhythms haven't been shattered by artificial suns. Archaeological evidence from sleeping quarters across the Viking world, from Iceland to York, from Dublin to Novgorod, shows remarkably consistent patterns. The sleeping platforms are built into the very architecture of their homes. Tell us, these people expected to sleep deeply and communally. They built their lives around this first sleep, not as an interruption to productivity, but as a fundamental part of existence. The midnight awakening, when night bloomed. Then, as reliably as the tide, they would wake, not with the jarring shock of an alarm, not with the panicked realization that sleep has abandoned them. They woke gently, naturally, the way a flower opens to dawn, except their dawn was still hours away. The Old Norse language had words for this time that we've lost in our modern tongues. This wasn't insomnia, a medical term that reeks of pathology. This was simply the watching time, the quiet time, the between time. Modern sleep researchers, in their sterile laboratories, with their EEG machines and their data points, have recently discovered what the Vikings lived every night. They call it segmented sleep or biphasic sleep, and they speak of it with the excitement of explorers finding new land. But this isn't new. It's ancient. It's how humans slept for millennia before we decided darkness was an enemy to be conquered. During this midnight waking, the Longhouse became a different world. The crushing responsibilities of daylight, the fields to be tended, the ships to be built, the raids to be planned receded into shadow. This was a liminal time, belonging neither to yesterday nor tomorrow. What did they do in these precious hours? The sagas give us glimpses. Astrid the Weaver might rise quietly, adding wood to the dying fire. The new flames would dance across her face as she worked her loom by firelight, creating patterns too complex for daylight's harsh clarity. The repetitive motion of weaving, the soft whisper of thread through thread, became a meditation that prepared her spirit for the second sleep. Young Eric, barely past his 10th winter, might wake to find his grandfather also alert. Together, they would step outside to urinate, and the old man would point to the stars, naming constellations, sharing the navigation wisdom that would one day carry Eric across unknown seas. These midnight lessons, whispered under the vast Nordic sky, carved themselves into memory with a depth that daylight learning could never achieve. Lovers found privacy in the darkness that communal living denied them during the day. The sagas speak obliquely of these midnight meetings, but archaeological evidence of bed closets, semi-private spaces within the larger sleeping area, tells us that the Vikings understood the human need for intimacy. Even within their communal lifestyle, some would pray to the old gods, or, as Christianity spread, to the new one. But these weren't the anxious pleadings of insomniacs begging for sleep. These were conversations with the divine, held in the thin hours when the veil between worlds grew gossamer light. Others simply lay quietly, thinking without the pressure of action. In our modern world, we've pathologized this midnight wakefulness. We call it racing thoughts or anxiety, but for the Vikings, this was thinking time, planning time, remembering time. Without the constant input of screens and notifications, their minds could actually complete thoughts, follow ideas to their conclusions, solve problems without interruption. Second sleep, the return. After an hour or two of quiet wakefulness, sleep would return, not forced, not medicated, but welcomed like an old friend coming back to finish a conversation. This second sleep, odorphion in Old Norse, carried them to dawn, but it was different from the first sleep. Where the first sleep was deep and heavy, the second was lighter, richer in dreams. The Vikings believed these dawn dreams were particularly meaningful, often prophetic. Modern sleep science confirms that the sleep cycles toward morning are indeed different, with more REM sleep, more vivid dreaming. As the first gray light touched the eastern sky, the household would wake gradually. No jarring alarms, no snooze buttons, no dragging themselves from bed with caffeine dependency already screaming in their veins. They woke because their bodies were finished sleeping, not because external forces demanded it. The science we're only now rediscovering. In 2001, historian Roger Ekirk published findings that shook the sleep research community. After 16 years of research, he had documented over 500 references to segmented sleep in historical documents. From medical texts to literature, from court records to personal diaries, the evidence was overwhelming. Humans had slept in segments throughout history until the Industrial Revolution changed everything. But the Vikings didn't need historians to tell them this. They lived it. Modern research has revealed the biological basis for their sleep pattern. The human body naturally produces a surge of prolactin during the night, creating a state of quiet wakefulness, core body temperature, which drops to promote initial sleep, naturally rises slightly after about 4 hours. Growth hormone, crucial for physical repair, is primarily released during the first half of the night. The second half of the night is richer in REM sleep, essential for emotional processing and memory consolidation. The Vikings' bifurcated sleep pattern perfectly matched these biological rhythms. They weren't fighting their nature, they were flowing with it. The seasonal symphony. But here's where Viking sleep becomes truly remarkable. They adapted this pattern to the extreme seasonal variations of the North. During summer, when the sun barely set in the northern reaches of their territory, sleep compressed. Archaeological evidence from summer dwellings shows different arrangements, more open, more flexible. The midnight sun demanded adaptation, and the Vikings provided it. They might sleep in shorter segments, take afternoon naps, or shift their patterns entirely. Yet they didn't panic about getting their 8 hours. They trusted their bodies to take what they needed. Winter was different. When darkness lasted 20 hours, the two-sleep pattern expanded. The first sleep might last 6 hours. The waking period 3, the second sleep another 5. What seems like excessive sleep to our modern sensibilities was actually an elegant adaptation to their environment. Their bodies stored rest the way they stored grain abundance in one season, carrying them through scarcity in another. The tragedy of consolidated sleep. The shift from segmented to consolidated sleep didn't happen overnight. It was a slow strangulation of an ancient rhythm, beginning with the spread of artificial lighting and accelerating with each technological advance. First came better candles and oil lamps, allowing the wealthy to extend their waking hours. Then came gas lighting, bringing perpetual dusk to city streets. Finally, Edison's electric bulb delivered the killing blow to segmented sleep. But it wasn't just the technology, it was the ideology. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how we work, it changed how we rest. Factory schedules demanded workers arrive at specific times, rested and ready for shifts that bore no relationship to natural light cycles. Sleep became something to be conquered, minimized, optimized for productivity. The Protestant work ethic transformed rest from a natural right into a necessary evil. Early to bed and early to rise replaced the gentler rhythm of sleeping when dark and waking when ready. 8 hours of sleep, continuous, unbroken, efficient, became the new gospel. We lost something profound in this transition. We lost the midnight hours of quiet contemplation. We lost the natural processing time between our days. We lost the gentle transition between sleep phases. Most tragically, we lost the ability to trust our body's wisdom about when and how to sleep. Today, when we wake at 3 a.m., we don't greet this wakefulness as an old friend. We catastrophize. We check the clock, calculate remaining sleep time, worry about tomorrow's productivity. We take pills to force ourselves back into unconsciousness, or we reach for our phones, flooding our brains with stimulation that guarantees the second sleep will never come. The Vikings would weep for us. We've gained the world, but lost the night. Chapter 2. The Sacred Darkness. When every star had a name and every shadow was a friend. To understand Viking sleep, you must first understand Viking darkness, not the weak, polluted darkness of modern nights, that pale imitation we call dark, perpetually violated by streetlights, house lights, car lights, and the omnipresent glow of civilization. No, you must understand true darkness. Darkness so complete it has weight. Darkness so absolute it becomes a presence rather than an absence. The Vikings lived in this darkness for much of their year. At the northern reaches of their territory, winter brought nights that lasted 20 hours. Even in the more southerly settlements, winter darkness dominated their existence in ways we can barely comprehend. And they didn't just endure this darkness, they embraced it. They built their lives around it. They found in it something we've lost, the prerequisite for perfect sleep: the architecture of night. Walk with me through the excavated remains of a Viking longhouse. Notice how few windows pierce the walls. Those that exist are small, easily covered with oiled cloth or wooden shutters. This wasn't primitive construction. This was intelligent design. The Vikings could have created larger openings. Their engineering skills, demonstrated in their ships and fortifications, were more than adequate for complex architecture, but they chose darkness. They understood something we've forgotten. Light is not always our friend. At the Borg excavation in Norway, archaeologists uncovered a chieftain's hall that tells us much about Viking attitudes toward light and dark. This was a wealthy, powerful household that could have afforded any luxury, yet the sleeping quarters were built to maximize darkness. The walls were thickest around the sleeping areas. The few windows faced away from the common sleeping platforms. In Iceland, where Viking architectural traditions persisted longest, we find even more elaborate arrangements. Sleeping areas were often built partially underground, carved into hillsides, or constructed with multiple layers of turf. These weren't desperate attempts to stay warm, though they certainly helped with that. These were conscious choices to create darkness so complete that noon and midnight became indistinguishable inside. The biochemistry of darkness. Modern sleep science has given us the vocabulary to understand what the Vikings knew instinctively. When darkness falls, true darkness, not the twilight we accept as night, a cascade of biological events begins. The pineal gland, that tiny pine cone-shaped organ nestled deep in our brain, responds to darkness by producing melatonin. This isn't just a sleep hormone, it's the chemical messenger that tells every cell in our body that night has arrived. It slows our heart rate, lowers our body temperature, and begins the complex process of preparing us for sleep. But here's the crucial point. This process requires real darkness, not dim light, not dark enough. True, complete darkness. Studies have shown that even tiny amounts of light, the glow of an alarm clock, the seep of streetlight around curtains, can suppress melatonin production by up to 50%. The blue light from our screens is even worse, capable of shutting down melatonin production entirely. Now, imagine the Viking experience. As the sun set early in winter, barely at all in summer, their bodies would begin producing melatonin in quantities we modern humans achieve only with pharmaceutical help. By the time full darkness arrived, their bloodstreams would be flooded with this natural sleep potion. Gunhild, a farmer's wife in Iceland, would feel this chemical tide as drowsiness. But she wouldn't fight it. There was no late-night show to watch, no emails to answer, no social media to scroll. When darkness and melatonin called, she answered. Firelight versus electric light, a world of difference. But wait, you might say. The Vikings had fire. They had candles and oil lamps. Didn't that disrupt their melatonin? This is where the story becomes even more fascinating. Not all light is created equal. The fires that warmed Viking halls produced light primarily in the red and yellow spectrum wavelengths that have minimal impact on melatonin production. The human circadian system evolved with fire. We've been staring into flames for hundreds of thousands of years. Our bodies know the difference between firelight and daylight. Archaeological analysis of Viking-era lamps and candles reveals another crucial fact. They were dim. A typical oil lamp produced perhaps 10, 20 lumens of light. A single modern LED bulb produces 800, 1,500 lumens. The Vikings' entire artificial lighting arsenal wouldn't match one of our bathroom fixtures. Moreover, these light sources were precious. Oil for lamps required labor to produce. Candles were valuable enough to be mentioned in wills. Light was used sparingly, strategically, respectfully. When Thorstein the merchant worked on his accounts by lamplight, he wasn't bathing his entire house in illumination. He was creating a small pool of light in an ocean of darkness. When he finished, darkness reclaimed its dominion instantly and completely. The mythology of night. The Vikings' relationship with darkness went beyond mere practicality. Their mythology reveals a culture that saw night not as an enemy, but as a fundamental force of existence. Not Night was a goddess in Norse mythology, described in the Prose Edda as a Jotun giant of dark beauty. She rode across the sky in a chariot pulled by a horse named Hrimfaxi Frostmane, whose foaming mouth created the morning dew. She wasn't a demon or a monster. She was a necessary force, the mother of day, grandmother of Thor. This personification matters. When you see night as a goddess rather than an absence, when darkness becomes a presence rather than a problem, your entire relationship with sleep changes. You don't fight the night, you welcome her. The Vikings' comfort with darkness extended to their navigation. These master sailors who crossed the North Atlantic using sunstones and stars were intimate with night in ways we've forgotten. They could read subtle differences in darkness, navigate by the feel of wind and wave when no stars showed. Darkness wasn't their enemy, it was their teacher. Seasonal darkness, the long sleep. The extreme seasonal variations in Nordic darkness created unique adaptations in Viking sleep patterns. During the depths of winter, when the sun barely kissed the horizon before fleeing again, darkness could last 20 hours or more. Modern humans forced to endure such darkness often develop seasonal affective disorder. We medicalize the darkness, fight it with light boxes and vitamin D supplements, but archaeological evidence suggests the Vikings adapted differently. Winter settlements show evidence of altered activity patterns. More time was spent on indoor crafts, storytelling, and rest. The sagas speak of the winter months as a time of reduced activity, but not depression. This was the season of stories, of deepening family bonds, of rest that prepared them for summer's frenetic activity. They didn't try to maintain summer schedules in winter darkness. They flowed with the season, sleeping more when darkness demanded it, storing rest like they stored grain. This seasonal variation in sleep, what modern researchers might call social jet lag when we fight it, was embraced as natural rhythm, the price of conquered darkness. We modern humans have won the war against darkness. Edison promised to make electric light so cheap that only the rich would burn candles. He succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Today, 80% of the world's population lives under light-polluted skies. In the United States and Europe, that figure rises to 99%. We've created a world of eternal twilight, where true darkness is so rare that national parks advertise it as a tourist attraction. The cost has been astronomical, and I don't mean the electric bill. Shift workers, forced to sleep during daylight and work in artificial light, show higher rates of cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. The World Health Organization has classified shift work as a probable carcinogen, primarily due to its disruption of natural light-dark cycles. Children exposed to artificial light in the evening show delayed melatonin production, later sleep times, and shortened sleep duration. The epidemic of ADHD and anxiety disorders in children correlates strongly with the spread of evening screen time. Adults fare no better. The average American spends 90% of their time indoors under artificial light. We wake to the harsh blue light of phone screens, work under fluorescent office lights, and end our days staring at televisions and tablets. Our pineal glands, confused by this constant twilight, produce melatonin erratically, if at all. We've created a world where good sleep requires blackout curtains, eye masks, and white noise machines. Technological solutions to the problems technology created. We've made darkness a luxury item, something to be purchased and installed rather than simply welcomed. Reclaiming the dark. What would the Vikings think of our illuminated nights? Imagine Eric the Red, that famous explorer, transported to modern New York City. The assault of light would be overwhelming Times Square at midnight, brighter than the brightest Nordic summer day. Apartments glowing with the blue light of screens, streets that never know true darkness. He might wonder why we fear the dark so much that we've banished it entirely. He might ask what we're running from, what terrors lurk in darkness that make us prefer sleepless twilight to restful night. The answer, of course, is that we're not running from anything. We've simply forgotten that darkness is our friend. We've been taught that productivity requires light, that safety requires illumination, that civilization itself depends on our victory overnight. But the Vikings knew better. They knew that darkness isn't the absence of light, it's the presence of peace. They knew that night isn't the enemy of day, it's the partner that makes day possible. In their darkness, the Vikings found deep, restorative sleep that came naturally and easily, a rhythm of life that matched their biology rather than fighting it. Time for contemplation and connection unavailable in the busy daylight. A profound connection to the natural world and its cycles. Freedom from the anxiety that comes with constant illumination and stimulation. We've gained much from our conquest of darkness. We can work at any hour, travel safely at night, and enjoy entertainment around the clock. But perhaps it's time to ask whether the price epidemic, insomnia, anxiety, and disconnection from natural rhythms has been too high. Perhaps it's time to make friends with darkness again. Chapter 3. The Warmth of the Pack. When privacy was loneliness and solitude was danger. Here's something that would horrify most modern Americans. The Vikings slept together, not just couples in their own rooms with children down the hall, everyone together, in the same space, breathing the same air, sharing the same dreams. The archaeological evidence is unequivocal. From the grand halls of Norwegian jarls to the modest farmsteads of Icelandic settlers, Viking-age dwellings featured communal sleeping arrangements. Long platforms ran along the walls wide enough for multiple bodies, without divisions or private spaces. This wasn't poverty. Even the wealthiest Vikings slept communally. This was choice. To understand why, we need to shed our modern obsession with privacy and remember something fundamental. Humans are pack animals. For 99% of our evolutionary history, sleeping alone meant death. The Viking communal sleeping arrangement wasn't a quaint cultural quirk. It was the continuation of a survival strategy encoded in our DNA. The architecture of together. Let me walk you through a typical Viking sleeping arrangement based on archaeological evidence from sites across the Norse world. The longhouse of Bjorn Ironside, a prosperous farmer in 10th century Iceland, stretches 30 meters long and 8 meters wide. Down each long wall runs a raised platform, andvegi in Old Norse, about 60 centimeters high and 2 meters deep. These platforms serve triple-duty seating during the day, workspace for crafts, and communal bed at night. As darkness falls, the transformation begins. Straw mattresses are arranged along the platforms. Woolen blankets are spread. Furs are laid out according to a complex hierarchy of status and need. The positioning matters. Bjorn and his wife Thorun claim the prime spot closest to the central hearth, but not so close that sparks are a danger. Their youngest children sleep between them, safe and warm. Older children arrange themselves nearby, close enough to feel secure but with a bit more independence. Bjorn's elderly mother, Gudrun, has the next position of honor. At 70 winters, her bones ache with cold, so she's near enough to the fire to stay warm through the night. Next to her sleeps Asta, her thrall slave turned faithful companion, who helps her rise when nature calls in the night. The household's unmarried men, Bjorn's younger brother, 2 nephews learning the farming trade, and 3 hired workers occupy the platform across the hall. They sleep in a row, the most senior nearest the fire, the youngest farthest away. At the far end, near the door, sleep the newest members of the household, a young couple recently married, still learning their place in the family hierarchy. Their position by the door means they're first to respond to nighttime disturbances, but also grants them a modicum of privacy for intimate moments. 23 souls in total, all sleeping in the same space. To modern sensibilities, it sounds like a nightmare. To the Vikings, it was home. The security of shared breath. The practical benefits of communal sleeping were immediate and obvious. In a world without police, without locks worth trusting, without emergency services, security came from numbers. Every person in that hall was a potential guardian. When raiders came in the night, and the sagas tell us they did, the alarm would be raised instantly. No single person bore the terrible burden of staying vigilant. Everyone's subconscious stood watch. The sagas are full of such moments. In Egil's saga, when enemies approach the farmstead at night, it's young Grim who wakes first, alerting the household in time to mount a defense. In Gisla Saga, the warned household sleeps in shifts, but still together, ready to respond as one. But it went deeper than physical security. There was psychological safety in those shared nights that we've almost entirely lost. Consider young Astrid, age 6, waking from a nightmare about Draugr, the undead of Norse mythology. In our world, she might cry alone in her room, waiting for parents who may or may not hear her. In the Viking world, she wakes to find herself surrounded by the breathing of her entire family, her grandmother's gentle snore, her father's deep respirations, her mother's familiar sleep sounds. The nightmare dissolves in the face of such tangible security. Modern child psychology has rediscovered what the Vikings knew. Instinctively, children who sleep near their caregivers show lower cortisol levels, cry less, and develop more secure attachments. The Vikings didn't need studies to tell them this. They saw it in their children's faces every morning. The dance of intimacy. But what about sex? It's the question everyone asks when confronted with Viking sleeping arrangements. How did couples maintain intimate relationships in such public settings? The answer reveals the sophisticated social dynamics of Viking households. First, the evidence suggests that Vikings had a more matter-of-fact attitude toward sexuality than many later Christian societies. Sex was a natural part of life, not a shameful secret. Second, the communal sleeping arrangement created its own forms of privacy. The sagas mention bed closets, semi-enclosed spaces within the larger sleeping area where couples could find relative seclusion. Archaeological evidence from several sites shows post holes and other structural elements that could have supported curtains or temporary divisions. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the Viking biphasic sleep pattern created natural opportunities for intimacy during the midnight waking period. While some tended fires or worked crafts, couples could slip away to other parts of the house or even outside during summer months. The sagas speak obliquely but clearly about these midnight trysts. In Cormac's saga, the protagonist visits his beloved when the household slept, suggesting both that such visits happened and that they required discretion. But there's something deeper here about the Viking approach to intimacy within community. They understood that privacy and isolation are not the same thing. You can be private within a community, sharing intimate moments while still being part of a larger whole. Modern Western culture, in our quest for absolute privacy, has often achieved only isolation. The warmth equation, the practical benefits of communal sleeping extended beyond security to basic survival. Viking houses, even the grandest halls, were cold. The central hearth provided the only heat, and it had to be banked low at night to prevent fires. In the depths of a Nordic winter with outside temperatures plunging to minus 30 degrees Celsius, body heat became a precious resource. 20 bodies sleeping in proximity created a microclimate of warmth that no individual could achieve alone. The physics are simple. Each adult human generates about 100 watts of heat at rest. 20 adults produce 2,000 watts, equivalent to a modern space heater. Add in children and the thick insulation of multiple blankets and furs, and you have a sleeping environment that could maintain comfortable temperatures even as Arctic winds howled outside. This communal warmth had profound implications for sleep quality. Modern research shows that temperature regulation is crucial for good sleep. The body needs to cool slightly to initiate sleep, then maintain a stable temperature throughout the night. The Viking communal sleeping arrangement created exactly these conditions, the initial cooling as fires died down. Then, stable warmth from collective body heat, hierarchy, and harmony. The Viking communal sleeping arrangement wasn't egalitarian. It was deeply hierarchical, reflecting the complex social structures of Norse society. But this hierarchy served a function beyond mere status display. The best positions near the fire, but not too near, away from the door and its drafts, went to those who needed them most, the elderly, the very young, pregnant women. High-status individuals got priority, but the sagas also show flexibility based on need. This nightly negotiation of space taught children about their place in society while also showing them they had a place. Everyone belonged somewhere on that platform. Everyone had a spot that was theirs, even if it wasn't the best spot. Modern sociologists studying traditional societies have noted that such clear hierarchies, paradoxically, can create less anxiety than our supposedly egalitarian arrangements. When everyone knows their place, there's less energy wasted on jockeying for position. The Vikings settled their status battles during the day. At night, everyone just slept. The sound of sleep. If you could travel back and spend a night in a Viking hall, the soundscape would be remarkable. Not quiet, never quiet, but full of the sounds of human presence. The deep breathing of tired farmers, the occasional cough or sneeze, children murmuring in their sleep, adults shifting position, adjusting furs, the creak of wooden platforms under moving bodies, someone rising to tend the fire or use the privy, whispered conversations between wakeful souls. To modern ears, trained to expect silence for sleep, it would seem impossibly noisy. But there's a difference between human sounds and mechanical noise. The Vikings slept to a symphony of biological rhythms, breathing, heartbeats, gentle movements. These sounds, research now shows, can actually promote deeper sleep by providing a consistent acoustic environment that masks sudden noises. Compare this to modern sleep environments, the sudden roar of a passing motorcycle, the electronic beep of appliances, the vibration of phones, the hum of air conditioners. We've traded the organic sounds of human presence for the mechanical intrusions of civilization. Dreams shared and multiplied. The Vikings believed dreams were significant, often prophetic. In a communal sleeping environment, dreams became shared experiences in ways we can hardly imagine. When Thorkel woke gasping from a vivid dream of ships burning, others would wake too. His dream would be discussed, interpreted, woven into the collective understanding of the household. Dreams weren't private psychological events, but communal experiences that bound the group together. This sharing of dream life created a rich psychological environment. Modern dream researchers have found that discussing dreams increases dream recall and can help process emotional experiences. The Vikings, without knowing the neuroscience, created optimal conditions for this processing. Children growing up in this environment learned that their inner life mattered to the community. Their nightmares were taken seriously, their happy dreams celebrated. This validation of inner experience, happening naturally in the communal sleeping space, provided psychological support that many modern children never receive. The technology of togetherness. The Viking communal sleeping arrangement required sophisticated social technologies that we've largely forgotten. These unwritten rules and practices allowed dozens of people to share sleeping space without chaos. The quiet hours. Once full darkness fell and people began settling for sleep, a different code of conduct applied. Voices dropped to whispers. Movements became careful and deliberate. The sagas occasionally mentioned someone breaking this code and facing social consequences. Respect for sleep-waking someone unnecessarily was a serious breach of etiquette. The Havamal contains advice about being a considerate guest, including not disturbing others' rest. Spatial negotiations. Despite the hierarchical arrangement, there was flexibility. A sick child might be moved closer to the fire, a pregnant woman given extra space. These negotiations happened through understood signals and quiet communication. Collective rhythm. The household developed a collective sleep rhythm. Early risers learned to move quietly. Night owls found quiet activities. Over time, the group's sleep patterns synchronized, much as women's menstrual cycles synchronize in close quarters. Privacy signals. Despite the communal nature, Vikings had ways of signaling needs for privacy. A turned back, a pulled blanket, a shift in position all carried meaning in the elaborate dance of communal living. The lost children. Perhaps nowhere is the contrast between Viking and modern sleeping arrangements more poignant than in the experience of children. Viking children never slept alone. From birth until marriage, they were surrounded by the breathing of their clan. They learned that darkness held no terrors that family couldn't conquer. They absorbed the rhythms of adult life, when to wake, when to sleep, how to be quiet, how to share space. Modern children often face the darkness alone from infancy. We place babies in separate rooms with monitors to watch them, convinced this is healthier, more hygienic, better for everyone. Then we wonder why so many children develop sleep anxieties, why bedtime becomes a battle, why they need night lights and white noise machines and elaborate routines to feel safe enough to sleep. The Vikings would be baffled by our practices. To them, leaving a child alone in the dark would seem like abandonment, possibly even cruelty. Their children slept surrounded by protection, learning from infancy that they were part of something larger than themselves. Research on co-sleeping cultures shows that children who sleep near caregivers develop different stress responses than those who sleep alone. They show lower baseline cortisol levels than me, less anxiety, and, paradoxically, greater independence during waking hours. Security in the night translates to confidence in the day. The slow death of communal sleep. The transformation from communal to private sleeping arrangements didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, driven by changes in architecture, economics, and social values. The first cracks appeared with Christianity. Monastic influences emphasized cellular living, individual monks in individual cells. As Christianity spread through Scandinavia, it brought new ideas about privacy, modesty, and the spiritual dangers of communal living. Growing wealth allowed for architectural elaboration. By the late Viking Age, some wealthy households featured separate sleeping chambers for the family heads. These were status symbols as much as practical arrangements. The real change came with urbanization, as Scandinavians moved from scattered farmsteads to concentrated towns. The extended household gave way to nuclear families, or smaller living spaces made communal sleeping impractical for non-family members. By the Renaissance, private bedchambers had become symbols of status across Europe. The communal hall gave way to houses with multiple rooms. Privacy became not just desired, but expected. The Industrial Revolution accelerated this atomization. Workers crowded into cities needed private spaces to maintain sanity. The nuclear family, sleeping behind closed doors, became the ideal. Extended families scattered for work, breaking the multi-generational sleeping arrangements that had persisted in rural areas. By the 20th century, even children having their own bedrooms became a marker of middle-class success in many Western countries. We've reached the logical endpoint, individuals sleeping not just in separate rooms but often in separate beds, even when married, each with their own climate control, their own entertainment systems, their own carefully curated sleep environment. We've gained privacy but lost community. We've gained quiet but lost security. We've gained control but lost connection. The echo of ancient needs. Despite our architectural evolution toward isolation, our bodies remember the communal sleeping of our ancestors. The evidence is everywhere if we know where to look. The popularity of white noise machines that replicate the sound of human breathing. The comfort many find in sleeping with pets. The way children instinctively seek their parents' beds during storms. The peace that comes from sleeping next to a trusted partner. These aren't weaknesses to be overcome. They're echoes of ancient wisdom, reminders that we evolved to sleep in groups. That isolation is the abnormal state, not communal rest. The military understands this. Basic training involves communal sleeping, partly for practical reasons, but also because it builds unit cohesion. Soldiers report sleeping better in barracks full of their squad than alone in private quarters. The pack instinct remains strong when we allow it to surface. Chapter 4. The Earth's Own Bed, where comfort came from the ground up. In our modern quest for the perfect mattress, we've created a bewildering array of options. Memory foam that molds to your body, latex that pushes back, springs counted in the thousands, cooling gels, copper infusions, and adjustable firmness zones. We spend fortunes on sleep surfaces, convinced that technology will finally deliver the perfect night's rest. The Vikings would have found our obsession amusing and our solutions unnecessarily complex. They achieved excellent sleep on beds made from materials they could gather in an afternoon's work. Their secret wasn't technology, it was understanding. The foundation wood's ancient wisdom. Every Viking bed began with wood, not the processed, treated lumber of modern construction, but living wood chosen with the wisdom of generations. Archaeological excavations reveal sleeping platforms built with remarkable sophistication, despite their apparent simplicity. At the Oseberg ship burial, the preserved remains of a 9th century sleeping platform show construction techniques that modern woodworkers admire. The planks were selected from specific parts of specific trees, heartwood for durability, sapwood where flexibility was needed. The wood was worked with the grain, never against it, creating surfaces that would last centuries without the warping and splitting that plagues modern manufactured materials. These platforms were typically raised 40, 60 centimeters off the ground, high enough to avoid the damp earth, but low enough for easy access. The height wasn't arbitrary. It created an air gap that prevented moisture from seeping up while allowing air circulation beneath. In the humid Nordic climate, this design prevented the mold and mildew that would have made sleep unhealthy. The wood itself mattered. Oak was prized for its durability and resistance to insects. Pine, abundant in Nordic forests, provided a softer surface and released subtle aromatics that modern research has shown can improve sleep quality. The choice depended on local availability and specific needs, but always reflected deep understanding of each wood's properties. Thorkel the carpenter, constructing a sleeping platform for a new household, would select each plank individually. This one, from a tree that grew slowly on a north-facing slope, would be denser, better for the frame. That one, from a faster-growing southern exposure tree, would have more spring, better for the sleeping surface. His hands would know the wood's quality by touch, his nose by scent. The first layer, straw's forgotten genius. Upon these wooden platforms, Vikings laid their first comfort layer straw. To modern minds, sleeping on straw sounds primitive, uncomfortable, perhaps even dirty. This prejudice blinds us to the sophisticated sleep surface straw actually provides. Fresh straw, properly prepared and regularly changed, creates what modern sleep scientists would call a responsive support system. Each straw stem is essentially a tiny spring, compressing under weight, but pushing back with gentle resistance. Thousands of these stems create a surface that's firm enough to support proper spinal alignment, but yielding enough to accommodate the body's curves. Archaeological evidence from preserved Viking-age buildings shows that straw wasn't simply thrown down haphazardly. It was carefully arranged, often in specific patterns that maximized comfort and support. The straw was laid with all stems pointing in the same direction initially, creating a smooth surface that would gradually conform to the sleeper's preferred position over time. But straw's benefits went beyond mere comfort. Temperature regulation straw is hollow, filled with air. This creates thousands of tiny insulation pockets that trap warm air in winter while allowing air circulation in summer. Modern high-tech mattresses spend millions trying to recreate what straw does naturally. Moisture management straw naturally wicks moisture away from the body. In the humid Nordic environment, this prevented the clammy discomfort that disrupts sleep. The moisture would evaporate through the loose structure rather than being trapped against the body. Natural antimicrobial properties. Certain types of straw, particularly rye and wheat, contain natural compounds that inhibit bacterial and fungal growth. While Vikings didn't understand microbiology, they observed that some types of straw stayed sweeter longer than others. Customizable firmness. By adding or removing straw, sleepers could adjust their bed's firmness. Areas that compressed too much could be refilled. This adaptability meant each sleeping spot gradually became perfectly suited to its regular occupant. Psychological comfort. The scent of fresh straw carries powerful associations. Modern aromatherapy recognizes that natural plant scents can reduce anxiety and promote relaxation. Vikings, sleeping on beds that smelled of summer fields, benefited from this effect nightly. The saga literature occasionally mentions the changing of straw bedding, treating it as a normal household task like any other. In Laxdela saga, preparing fresh bedding for guests is mentioned as a mark of hospitality. This regular refreshing meant Vikings slept on clean, supportive surfaces, unlike modern mattresses that accumulate years of dead skin cells, dust mites, and their waste products. The comfort layers, wool's warm embrace. Above the straw came wool layers of it in various forms. Archaeologists have found preserved fragments of Viking-age bedding that reveal a sophisticated understanding of wool's properties. First came coarse woolen pads or mattresses stuffed with raw wool. These provided additional cushioning while maintaining the breathability essential for comfort. The wool was often minimally processed, retaining its natural lanolin content. This waxy substance, which modern textile processing removes, provides several benefits: natural water resistance, antimicrobial properties, a pleasant, calming scent, preservation of the wool's loft, and resilience. Above these pads came woven woolen blankets. The quality varied with wealth and status, from rough homespun to finely woven blankets that rivaled modern textiles in their softness, but all shared wool's remarkable properties. Temperature regulation supreme wool can absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture without feeling wet. This means it can absorb night sweats while still providing insulation. As the moisture evaporates, it actually creates a cooling effect, natural climate control that adjusts automatically through the night. Fire-resistance wool is naturally fire-resistant, requiring temperatures over 600 degrees Celsius to ignite. In houses heated by open fires, this safety feature was crucial. Vikings could sleep near their heat source without the fear that haunts modern synthetic bedding users. Hypoallergenic properties, wool structure resists dust mites and mold growth. Its ability to rapidly dry out creates an environment hostile to allergens. Vikings, unknowingly, slept in one of the healthiest possible environments for respiratory health. The crown furs and status. For those who could afford them, animal furs provided the final layer of Viking bedding. These weren't mere displays of wealth, they were functional additions that enhanced sleep quality in specific ways. Bear fur, the most prized, provided unmatched insulation. The hollow structure of bear hair creates air pockets that trap warmth while remaining surprisingly lightweight. A single bear pelt could provide more insulation than multiple wool blankets while allowing better freedom of movement during sleep. Wolf pelts, also highly valued, had different properties. Wolf fur is incredibly dense, with up to 20,000 hairs per square inch. This density created a sleeping surface that was simultaneously soft and supportive. The psychological impact of sleeping under the skin of an apex predator shouldn't be underestimated either. It was a nightly reminder of human triumph over nature's dangers. Sealskins, common in coastal areas, provided waterproof ground layers for outdoor sleeping. Their unique properties, waterproof on one side, insulating on the other, made them ideal for Vikings who might need to sleep in varying conditions. Reindeer hides, especially common in the northern reaches of Viking territory, offered perhaps the best all-around sleeping fur. Reindeer hair is hollow like bear fur but finer in texture. It provides excellent insulation while being lighter than bear fur and more readily available. The saga literature treats these furs as prized possessions. In Egil Saga, valuable furs are specifically mentioned as gifts and inheritance items. They were investments in comfort that could last generations with proper care. The pillow questioned support for the weary head. Modern sleep culture obsesses over pillows, their height, firmness, material, cooling properties. The Viking approach was characteristically more straightforward, but no less effective. Archaeological evidence shows that Viking pillows were typically small, firm cushions filled with various materials. Feathers from ducks and geese for the wealthy, wool for the middle classes, straw, moss, or even sawdust for the poor. These pillows were much firmer and lower than modern preferences. A preserved example from the Oseberg burial measures only about 10 centimeters in height when compressed, what we might call a low-profile pillow today. This firmness wasn't primitive, it was practical. Modern sleep research increasingly suggests that overly soft, high pillows contribute to neck pain and poor sleep posture. The cervical spine needs support, not elevation. Viking pillows provided exactly this. Some evidence suggests that Vikings also used wooden headrests, similar to those found in other ancient cultures. These might seem impossibly uncomfortable to modern sensibilities, but they serve important functions, maintaining hairstyles important in a culture that valued elaborate braids, keeping the head elevated above crawling insects, providing consistent support that doesn't compress over the night. The seasonal symphony of sleep. One of the most sophisticated aspects of Viking bedding was its adaptability to seasons. This wasn't one sleep system used year-round, but a dynamic arrangement that changed with the weather. Summer bedding was minimal, perhaps just a woolen blanket over fresh straw. The straw itself might be different, using lighter, airier varieties. Furs were stored away, replaced by lighter woven blankets. As autumn approached, the bedding transformation began. Fresh straw was laid, chosen for its insulating properties rather than just comfort. Wool layers multiplied. Furs came out of storage, aired and beaten clean. Winter bedding was a fortress against cold. Multiple layers of everything, double straw, extra wool, all available furs. The sleeping platform became a nest, a cocoon against the fierce Nordic winter. Spring brought another transformation. Winter bedding was aired, cleaned, and gradually reduced. Straw was changed completely, removing any moisture accumulated over the winter months. This seasonal adaptation meant Vikings always slept in bedding appropriate to conditions, unlike modern sleepers who often use the same mattress and bedding year-round, then wonder why they're too hot in summer or too cold in winter. The chemistry of natural sleep. What Vikings achieved through intuition and tradition. Modern science now validates through research. Natural bedding materials create a chemical environment conducive to sleep in ways synthetic materials struggle to match. Negative ion generation. Natural materials like wool and fur generate negative ions, especially when compressed and released through movement. Research has linked negative ion exposure to improved mood, reduced stress, and better sleep quality. Synthetic materials typically generate positive ions associated with fatigue and irritation. VOC-free environment modern mattresses, off-gas, volatile organic compounds, VOCs for years after manufacture. These chemicals have been linked to respiratory issues, headaches, and sleep disruption. Viking bedding, made entirely from unprocessed natural materials, created a chemical-free sleep environment Natural aromatherapy, the subtle sense of Viking bedding, lanolin from wool, the sweet smell of fresh straw, the earthy scent of furs all contributed to a calming sensory environment. Modern aromatherapy recognizes these natural scents as sleep-promoting, but Vikings enjoyed them nightly without conscious effort. Grounding effects. Sleeping close to the earth on natural materials may provide electrical grounding effects that modern research suggests can improve sleep quality and reduce inflammation. While Vikings didn't understand electrical grounding, they experienced its benefits nightly. The maintenance ritual. Viking bedding required regular maintenance, but this wasn't seen as a burden. It was part of the rhythm of household life. This maintenance served multiple purposes beyond mere cleanliness. Straw, changing fresh. Straw was typically laid seasonally, but might be refreshed more often if needed. The old straw wasn't wasted, it was composted or used as animal bedding, creating a circular economy within the household. Wool beating, woolen blankets and pads were regularly beaten and aired. This restored their loft, removed dust, and refreshed their insulating properties. The communal nature of this work, often done by groups of women working together, reinforced social bonds. Fur care furs required special attention. They were beaten to remove dust, rubbed with sawdust or sand to clean them, and carefully stored when not in use. This care could make a good fur last generations. Platform maintenance. The wooden platforms were regularly cleaned and checked for damage. Any weak boards were replaced. This preventive maintenance meant sleeping platforms could last the lifetime of the building. This regular interaction with bedding created an intimate knowledge of its condition. Vikings knew when straw was losing its spring, when wool was compacting too much, when furs needed cleaning. They maintained their sleep environment actively. Unlike modern consumers who often use mattresses well past their functional lifetime. The lost art of making a bed. The Viking approach to bedding represents a lost art, the creation of optimal sleep surfaces using only natural, local materials. They achieved proper spinal support through layered construction, superior temperature regulation through material choice, hygienic sleeping conditions through regular maintenance, customizable comfort through adjustable layers, chemical-free sleep environments, sustainable biodegradable materials, multi-generational durability with proper care. Modern mattress companies spend millions trying to recreate these benefits through technology. Memory foam attempts to provide customized support. Cooling gels try to regulate temperature. Hypoallergenic treatments fight dust mites. Adjustable bases offer customization. Yet, the Vikings achieved all this with straw, wool, and fur. Their secret wasn't advanced materials, it was deep understanding of natural materials' properties and willingness to work with rather than against nature's designs. Chapter 5. Nature's Pharmacy. The Sleep Herbs of the North. When medicine grew wild and wisdom grew deep, in the archaeological remains of a Viking-age settlement near Uppsala, Sweden, researchers made a discovery that would reshape our understanding of Norse medical knowledge. Among the usual detritus of daily life broken pottery, discarded bones, lost needles, they found something extraordinary, a leather pouch, miraculously preserved in the anaerobic mud, still containing dried plant materials. Analysis revealed valerian root, hops flowers, and meadowsweet, all plants modern science recognizes as possessing sedative properties. This wasn't a random collection. This was a sleep pharmacy, 1,000 years old, carrying the same remedies we're rediscovering today in our desperate quest for better rest. The Vikings, it seems, were far more sophisticated in their understanding of sleep medicine than we've given them credit for. The wise women and their green allies. In Viking society, medical knowledge was primarily the domain of women. The vulva seeress and the fjolkunikona, literally very knowledgeable woman, served as healers, midwives, and keepers of herbal wisdom. Their knowledge, passed down through generations in an unbroken chain stretching back to time immemorial, included sophisticated understanding of plants that could court sleep, banish nightmares, and ease the restless mind. This wasn't superstition or primitive guesswork. Archaeological evidence, combined with linguistic analysis and comparison with documented medical traditions from medieval Scandinavia, reveals a pharmacopoeia that modern science increasingly validates. Consider Thorun Herbkeeper, a composite figure based on archaeological and literary evidence. In her garden grow rows of carefully tended plants. She knows exactly when to harvest each one. Valerian roots in the autumn, when their potency peaks. Hops flowers just as they begin to brown. Chamomile blossoms picked in the morning after the dew has dried, but before the sun has leached their volatile oils. Her knowledge goes beyond mere identification. She understands preparation methods that maximize each plant's effectiveness. She knows which plants work well together and which should never be combined. She recognizes that the same herb that brings peaceful sleep to one person might cause nightmares in another. This personalized approach to herbal medicine, what we might now call precision medicine, was standard practice in the Viking Age. Valerian, the root of deep sleep, of all the sleep herbs in the Viking pharmacopoeia. Valerian Valeriana officinalis was perhaps the most valued. Archaeological evidence confirms its cultivation in Norse settlements from Iceland to the Russian rivers. The plant's very name may derive from the Latin valere, meaning to be strong or to be well, suggesting its medicinal importance was recognized across cultures. Viking women didn't just use valerian, they understood it with a sophistication that impresses modern herbalists. Harvesting wisdom valerian roots were harvested in late autumn, after the aerial parts had died back. This timing, which traditional herbalists insisted upon, has been validated by modern analysis showing that root potency peaks just before the ground freezes. Preparation methods. The roots were cleaned, sliced, and dried in the rafters of the house, never in direct sunlight, which would degrade the active compounds. This gentle drying method preserved the valerianic acids and valproates that modern science recognizes as the plant's primary sedative compounds. Dosage understanding. The sagas and later medieval texts suggest Vikings understood that valerian's effects were dose-dependent. Small amounts could ease anxiety without causing drowsiness, useful for warriors before battle. Larger doses promoted deep sleep. Modern research has confirmed what Viking herbalists knew valerian works. Clinical studies show it reduces sleep latency, the time it takes to fall asleep, by an average of 15, 20 minutes, and improves sleep quality without the grogginess associated with pharmaceutical sleep aids. It works by increasing GABA levels in the brain, the same neurotransmitter targeted by benzodiazepines, but through a gentler, more sustainable mechanism. Hops beyond the brewing kettle. While hops humulus lupulus are best known today as a beer ingredient, Vikings understood their sedative properties extended far beyond brewing. Archaeological evidence of hop cultivation appears at numerous Viking sites, often in contexts suggesting medicinal rather than purely brewing use. The Vikings' use of hops for sleep was remarkably sophisticated. The sleep pillow. Dried hop flowers were sewn into small cloth pillows placed near the sleeper's head. The volatile oils, released by body heat and movement, provided gentle sedation throughout the night. This practice, documented in later medieval texts but likely much older, has been validated by modern research showing that hop aromatherapy can improve sleep quality. The evening brew. While everyday ale was weak by modern standards, special evening brews were made with extra hops specifically for their sedative effect. These night ales were consumed an hour before sleep timing that modern pharmacology confirms allows optimal absorption of hops' sedative compounds. Combination wisdom. Vikings often combined hops with valerian, a pairing that modern research shows is more effective than either herb alone. This synergistic effect, discovered through generations of observation, demonstrates the sophistication of Viking herbal medicine. The primary sedative compounds in hops, including 2-methyl-3-butanol, have been shown to bind to the same brain receptors as alcohol, but without alcohol's sleep-disrupting effects. Vikings who drank hoppy ale before bed were unknowingly optimizing their sleep chemistry. The Northern Pharmacy, a catalog of sleep, beyond valerian and hops. The Viking herbal sleep pharmacy included numerous plants, each with specific uses. Meadowsweet Filipendula ulmaria, called mjodurt in Old Norse. This plant was sacred to the goddess Freya. Vikings used it for pain relief and sleep promotion. Modern analysis reveals it contains salicylates, compounds related to aspirin, explaining its effectiveness for pain-related insomnia. Chamomile Matricaria chamomilla, though not native to Scandinavia. Chamomile was traded along Viking routes and cultivated in southern settlements. Its gentle sedative effects made it particularly suitable for children and the elderly. The compound apigenin, abundant in chamomile, binds to benzodiazepine receptors in the brain, providing mild sedation without dependency risk. Linden/lime flowers. Tilia cordata. The flowers of the linden tree were harvested in midsummer and dried for year-round use. Vikings made a sweet, mild tea that promoted relaxation and sleep. Modern research confirms linden flowers contain flavonoids with anxiolytic properties. Wild lettuce, Lactuca virosa, known as poor man's opium. Wild lettuce was used carefully for severe insomnia. Its milky sap contains lactucarium, which has mild sedative effects. Vikings understood its power and potential dangers, using it only when gentler herbs failed. St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum, called Balder's brow in Norse. This sunny flower was used for winter depression and associated sleep problems. Modern research confirming its antidepressant effects validates Viking observations about its mood-lifting and sleep-promoting properties. The ritual of remedy. Viking herbal medicine was never just about the plants. It was about the entire context of healing, a holistic approach that modern medicine is only beginning to rediscover. When Astrid the healer prepared a sleep remedy, the process was as important as the product, the consultation. She would speak with the sleepless person, understanding not just their symptoms but their life situation. Was this new mother's insomnia from worry about her baby? Was this warrior's restlessness from battle memories? Was this elder's wakefulness from joint pain? Each cause required a different approach. The preparation herbs were prepared with intention and ceremony. Water was drawn fresh from a clean source. The brewing vessel was specific to medicinal preparations, never used for ordinary cooking. Prayers might be said to Nat, goddess of night, or to Air, goddess of healing. The administration. The remedy was given with instructions that went beyond dosage. Drink this as the fire burns low. Think of peaceful waters as you sip. Let each swallow carry away the day's troubles. These instructions, which modern medicine might dismiss as placebo effect, actually enhance the herb's effectiveness through psychosomatic pathways. The follow-up. Unlike modern medicine's take two and call me in the morning approach, Viking healers maintained relationships with their patients. They adjusted remedies based on results, changed herbs with the seasons, and provided ongoing support. This integrated approach, combining effective herbs with ritual, intention, and ongoing care, created a healing system more comprehensive than either pure pharmacology or pure psychology alone. Seasonal adaptations in sleep medicine. The extreme seasonal variations of the Nordic world required adaptive approaches to sleep medicine. Viking herbalists understood that the body's needs changed with the light. Summer herbs. During the white nights of summer, when darkness barely touched the northern lands, stronger sedatives were needed. Valerian doses increased. Wild lettuce might be added for particularly difficult cases. The goal was to override the body's natural response to constant light. Winter support. In the deep darkness of winter, different problems emerged. Depression, lethargy, and excessive sleep were common. Herbs shifted toward those with mood-lifting properties, St. John's wort, rhodiola if available through trade, and stimulating herbs for morning use. Transition seasons, spring and autumn, with their rapidly changing light, brought their own challenges. Adaptogenic herbs, those that help the body adjust to change, were emphasized. Combinations were adjusted weekly as the light shifted. This seasonal approach represents sophisticated understanding of circadian biology that modern chronotherapy is only beginning to match. The child's gentle sleep. Viking herbalists showed particular care in treating children's sleep problems. The herbs used for young ones were gentler, the doses smaller, the approach more cautious. Chamomile and honey. The standard children's sleep remedy combined weak chamomile tea with honey. The chamomile provided mild sedation, while honey's tryptophan content supported melatonin production. This combination, given warm before bed, soothed both body and mind. Catnip for colicky babies, though famous for exciting cats. Catnip Nepeta cataria has the opposite effect on humans. Viking mothers used weak catnip tea for colicky babies who couldn't sleep due to digestive discomfort. Modern research confirms catnip's antispasmodic and mild sedative effects. Lavender washing. Though lavender had to be imported to most Viking territories, it was valued for children's sleep. Bedding was washed in lavender water, creating a gentle aromatherapy effect. This practice, documented in later medieval texts, likely has ancient roots. The care taken with children's sleep remedies reveals a culture that understood the importance of establishing healthy sleep patterns early in life, wisdom many modern parents could benefit from. The warrior's rest. Viking warriors faced unique sleep challenges. The hypervigilance necessary for survival in battle didn't switch off easily in peacetime. What we now call PTSD was certainly present in Viking society, though understood differently. The sagas occasionally mention warriors who couldn't sleep after battles, who were haunted by the faces of the slain, who startled awake ready to fight. Viking herbalists developed specific approaches for these troubled sleepers, stronger sedatives. Warriors might receive valerian doses that would be excessive for others. Wild lettuce might be added for its mild analgesic properties, easing both physical and psychic pain. Ritual cleansing beyond herbs. Warriors underwent ritual cleansing after battles. These ceremonies, which might include specific herbs burned as incense, served psychological functions we now recognize as important for processing trauma. Gradual withdrawal. Unlike modern approaches that often involve long-term medication, Viking herbalists worked to gradually reduce warriors' dependence on sleep herbs. As the battle memories faded, so did the herbal support. Trade routes of rest. The Viking trade networks, stretching from Greenland to Constantinople, brought new sleep remedies into the Nordic pharmacopoeia. Opium poppy. Though used very cautiously, archaeological evidence suggests some Viking healers had access to opium through eastern trade routes. Its use was reserved for severe pain-related insomnia or terminal illness. Cannabis hemp was certainly grown for fiber, and some evidence suggests knowledge of its psychoactive properties. Whether it was used medicinally for sleep is debated, but its presence in the archaeological record is undeniable. Mediterranean herbs, lavender, rosemary, and other Mediterranean herbs entered Viking medicine through trade. These exotic remedies were expensive and thus reserved for the wealthy, but their presence shows the Vikings' openness to new medical knowledge. The Christian transformation. As Christianity spread through Scandinavia, attitudes toward herbal medicine began to change. What had been seen as natural wisdom became suspect, possibly pagan, potentially diabolical. Yet the herbs themselves were too effective to abandon entirely. Christian monks, the new medical authorities, simply rebranded them. Valerian became St. George's herb. St. John's wort already carried a Christian name. Prayers to Norse goddesses were replaced with prayers to saints. The knowledge survived, but transformed. Monastery gardens grew the same herbs wise women had cultivated. Monk physicians prescribed the same remedies, just with different explanations for their efficacy. Rediscovering Viking wisdom. Modern science has validated much of Viking herbal sleep medicine. Valerian is now a well-studied sleep aid. Available in standardized extracts, hops are recognized for their sedative properties. Chamomile is one of the most popular herbal sleep aids worldwide. Lavender aromatherapy is standard in many sleep clinics. The combination approaches Vikings used often prove more effective than single herbs. Yet, something has been lost in our modern standardization and isolation of active compounds. The Vikings understood that herbs were more than collections of chemicals. They were allies, teachers, parts of a complex web of relationships between humans and plants. Their holistic approach, considering the person, the season, the preparation method, the ritual context, created a system of sleep medicine more nuanced than our pharmaceutical model. They achieved what we struggle with: effective sleep support without dependency, personalized treatment without expensive testing, sustainable remedies without side effects. Chapter 6: Feast and Fast. The Viking Diet of Dreams. When sunset meant supper's end. In our modern world, dinner is often the day's largest meal. Eaten late, heavy with processed foods that burden our digestive systems through the night. We go to bed with stomachs churning, blood sugar spiking and crashing, wondering why sleep eludes us. The Vikings would have seen our eating patterns as madness. Their approach to food and sleep wasn't based on nutritional science. They had no concept of macronutrients or circadian biology, yet through necessity and observation, they developed eating patterns that modern sleep researchers now recognize as nearly optimal for rest. The rhythm of Viking meals. Archaeological evidence, combined with saga references and practical considerations of life without artificial light, reveals a consistent pattern of Viking meal timing. Dagmal day meal. The first substantial meal came not immediately upon waking, but after the morning's first work was complete. In winter, this might be several hours after rising. In summer, perhaps just 1 or 2. This natural intermittent fasting, breaking the fast only when genuinely hungry rather than by the clock, aligns with modern research on metabolic health and sleep quality. Not-mal night meal. The second and final major meal occurred in late afternoon or early evening, time to finish well before darkness fell completely. This timing, dictated by the practical need to prepare and consume food in daylight, created an ideal fasting period before sleep. Consider Bjorn, the blacksmith, in his Norwegian forge. He rises before dawn in winter, tends his fire, begins his work. Only when the sun climbs high enough to work by perhaps 4 hours after waking does he break his fast with a bowl of porridge enriched with butter and dried berries. He works through the day, sustained by this meal and perhaps some bread and cheese at midday. As the sun begins its descent, his wife Gudrun calls the household to their main meal. By the time darkness claims the land, digestion is well underway. When sleep comes hours later, his stomach is quiet, his blood sugar stable. This pattern unknowingly created optimal conditions for sleep. Modern research shows that eating within 3 hours of bedtime significantly disrupts sleep architecture, reducing deep sleep and increasing nighttime awakenings. The Vikings' natural meal timing avoided this entirely. The sleep-promoting Viking plate. Analysis of food remains, cooking vessels, and human remains from Viking sites reveals a diet that modern nutritionists would recognize as remarkably sleep-friendly. Protein foundations. Archaeological evidence shows Vikings consumed substantial protein from varied sources: fish, meat, eggs, dairy. This protein provided abundant tryptophan, the amino acid precursor to serotonin and melatonin. But unlike modern high-protein diets, often consumed late in the day, Viking protein was eaten early, allowing time for conversion to sleep-promoting neurotransmitters. Omega-3 abundance isotope analysis of Viking bones consistently shows marine signatures, confirming the importance of fish in their diet. Fatty fish like herring, mackerel, and salmon weren't just preserved foods for winter, they were dietary staples rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Modern research has revealed the crucial connection between omega-3s and sleep. DHA, abundant in fatty fish, is essential for melatonin production. EPA, another fish oil component, reduces inflammation that can disrupt sleep. Vikings consuming fish several times weekly would have maintained omega-3 levels that modern humans achieve only through deliberate supplementation. Complex carbohydrates, barley, rye, and oats form the grain foundation of Viking diet. These whole grains, consumed as porridge, bread, and ale, provided complex carbohydrates that supported stable blood sugar through the night. The contrast with modern refined carbohydrates is stark, where our white bread and pasta create blood sugar spikes and crashes that fragment sleep. Viking whole grains provided steady energy. Their high fiber content also supported gut health, increasingly recognized as crucial for sleep quality through the gut-brain axis. Fermented foundations. Perhaps no aspect of Viking food culture was more important for sleep than their reliance on fermentation. Archaeological evidence shows fermentation was central to Viking food preservation and preparation. Skyr. This cultured dairy product, still popular in Iceland, is rich in casein protein and probiotics. Casein is a slow-digesting protein that provides steady amino acid release through the night. The probiotics support gut health and, research suggests, sleep quality. Tau. Fermented fish. Various forms of fermented fish provided year-round protein and enhanced omega-3 availability. The fermentation process also creates beneficial compounds absent in fresh fish. Sauerkraut and fermented vegetables, preserved vegetables provided vitamins through winter while supporting gut microbiome diversity. Chow. Sourdough breads. Viking breads were naturally fermented, making nutrients more bioavailable and reducing the blood sugar impact compared to modern yeasted breads. This fermentation-heavy diet created a gut microbiome dramatically different from modern humans. Emerging research links gut bacteria diversity to sleep quality, suggesting Vikings' fermented foods supported their rest in ways we're only beginning to understand. The blessing of limited sugar. Perhaps nothing differentiates Viking and modern diets more starkly than sugar consumption. The average American consumes 77 grams of added sugar daily. Vikings had access to only one sweetener, honey, and that in limited quantities. This scarcity was a blessing for sleep. Modern research consistently links high sugar consumption to poor sleep quality. Blood sugar spikes and crashes fragment sleep. Sugar consumption increases inflammatory markers that disrupt rest. High sugar intake is associated with lighter, less restorative sleep. Vikings sweetened their lives differently. Fruits, available seasonally, provided natural sugars along with fiber that moderated absorption. Honey, used sparingly in mead or medicine, was a treat rather than a staple. Their palates, unaccustomed to intense sweetness, found satisfaction in foods modern humans would consider bland. This low-sugar diet maintained stable blood glucose through the night, a key factor in uninterrupted sleep that many modern humans achieve only through careful dietary management. Seasonal eating, seasonal sleeping. The Viking diet varied dramatically with seasons, creating natural cycles that supported year-round sleep quality. Summer abundance, fresh vegetables, new milk, fresh meat, and fish provided lighter fare during long days. The diet naturally shifted toward foods that wouldn't weigh down workers during intense summer activity. Evening meals could be smaller, earlier, supporting sleep despite extended daylight. Autumn preparation. The harvest season brought grain, abundance, and final fattening of animals before winter slaughter. Bodies naturally prepared for winter by increasing food intake, but still within the confines of daylight eating. Winter sustenance. Preserved foods dominated dried fish, fermented vegetables, stored grains, preserved dairy. These foods, dense in calories and nutrients, supported bodies through cold nights. The heavier evening meals of winter were still consumed hours before sleep, allowing digestion during evening activities around the fire. Spring renewal as stored foods dwindled. Vikings often experienced a natural fast before spring's new growth. This seasonal caloric restriction, while challenging, may have provided metabolic benefits, including improved sleep quality. Research shows periodic fasting can enhance sleep depth. The lost art of mindful eating. Viking meals were communal events, eaten without distraction of screens or books, focused on food and fellowship. This mindful eating, necessary in their world, provided benefits we're rediscovering. Proper chewing without soft processed foods. Vikings chewed thoroughly. This begins digestion in the mouth, reducing stomach burden and potential sleep disruption. Slow consumption meals couldn't be rushed when eating required real effort. This pace allowed satiety signals to register, preventing overeating that disrupts sleep. Social connection. Communal meals provided social bonding that reduced stress and anxiety, major sleep disruptors in modern life. Gratitude practices. Saga references suggest meals often began with thanks to gods or hosts. This gratitude practice, research shows, improves sleep quality by reducing anxiety and promoting positive emotions. Hydration wisdom. Viking beverage choices supported sleep in ways modern drinks often undermine. Clean water sources were precious and protected. Vikings drank water throughout the day but reduced intake toward evening, naturally avoiding the sleep disruption of nighttime bathroom trips. Weak ale. Daily ale contained only 2 to 3% alcohol, providing hydration with minimal intoxication. This session strength allowed social drinking without sleep architecture disruption. Whey drinks. Byproducts of cheesemaking provided protein-rich drinks that supported stable blood sugar. Herbal teas. As discussed in the previous chapter, medicinal teas were common, many specifically for evening consumption. Notably, absent caffeine. While Vikings traded far enough to potentially encounter tea or coffee, these stimulants weren't part of their culture. Their morning alertness came from natural circadian rhythms rather than chemical enhancement. The feast exception. Viking culture certainly included feasting, legendary gatherings with heroic consumption of food and strong drink. But these were exceptions, not daily practice. The sagas make clear these were special events, weddings, seasonal celebrations, victory feasts. Even these feasts followed patterns that minimized sleep disruption. They occurred earlier in the day when possible. Physical activity, dancing, games, fighting helped metabolize the excess. Recovery time was expected and planned for. Regular eating patterns resumed quickly. This feast and fast pattern, research suggests, may be healthier than consistent overeating. Periodic overindulgence followed by return to baseline eating patterns allows metabolic flexibility that supports overall health, including sleep. The forgotten nutrient darkness. Beyond what Vikings ate, when they ate, it created optimal conditions for a nutrient we rarely consider darkness. By finishing meals before nightfall, Vikings allowed their bodies to produce melatonin unimpeded by the insulin response to food. Modern research reveals intricate connections between meal timing and circadian rhythms, late eating delays, melatonin production. Food consumption resets peripheral body clocks. Digestion requires energy that competes with sleep processes. Vikings avoided these conflicts simply by following natural light patterns. Their bodies could fully transition into nighttime physiology without mixed signals from late meals. Specific sleep superfoods in the Viking diet. Certain Viking dietary staples deserve special mention for their sleep-promoting properties. Fatty fish. Beyond omega-3s, fish like salmon and herring provide vitamin D, crucial for sleep regulation. Vikings, consuming fish several times weekly, maintained vitamin D levels that modern indoor-dwelling humans achieve only through supplementation. Oats, a Viking breakfast staple. Oats contain melatonin and complex carbohydrates that promote steady blood sugar. They also provide magnesium, a mineral crucial for sleep that's deficient in many modern diets. Cherries, wild cherries, available seasonally, are one of few natural melatonin sources. Vikings would have consumed them fresh in summer, perhaps unknowingly supporting their sleep during the challenging white nights. Walnuts, where available through trade. Walnuts provided plant-based omega-3s and melatonin. Their appearance in archaeological sites suggests recognition of their value. Dairy fresh and fermented dairy products provided calcium and tryptophan. The combination, research shows, optimizes the conversion of tryptophan to melatonin. The warrior diet, unintentional intermittent fasting. Viking eating patterns unknowingly followed what modern nutritionists call intermittent fasting, extended periods without food that allow metabolic rest and cellular repair. This pattern, research increasingly shows, improves sleep quality through multiple mechanisms. Enhanced autophagy, cellular cleanup during fasting periods, improved insulin sensitivity, supporting stable nighttime blood sugar, increased production of growth hormone during fasted sleep, reduced inflammation that can disrupt rest. Vikings achieved these benefits not through deliberate restriction, but through natural patterns imposed by their lifestyle. They proved what modern biohackers spend fortunes trying to achieve, that aligning eating with natural rhythms optimizes both waking performance and sleeping recovery. The price of progress. The transition from Viking eating patterns to modern habits represents one of history's most dramatic dietary shifts. Meal timing, from eating with daylight to eating at all hours. Food processing, from whole foods to refined products. Sugar content, from honey scarcity to sugar abundance. Fermentation, from daily fermented foods to sterile processed foods. Eating speed, from slow communal meals to fast solo consumption. Seasonal variation, from dramatic seasonal shifts to year-round sameness. Each change moved us further from eating patterns that support natural sleep. We've gained convenience, but lost the digestive peace that comes from working with our biology rather than against it. Lessons from the Viking table. The Viking approach to food and sleep offers actionable insights for modern insomniacs. Finish eating before sunset, or at least 3-4 hours before bed. Emphasize protein and complex carbohydrates early in the day. Include fermented foods for gut-sleep axis. Support, minimize sugar, especially in the evening. Eat mindfully and communally when possible. Allow seasonal variation in diet and appetite. Consider natural fasting periods rather than constant grazing. The Vikings achieved optimal sleep nutrition not through supplements or special diets, but through simple alignment with natural patterns. They proved that when we eat in harmony with our circadian rhythms, sleep comes as naturally as darkness follows daylight. Chapter 7. Bodies Built for Sleep, the Physical Price of Rest. When every day was training day, modern fitness culture has created a paradox. We spend fortunes on gym memberships, rise before dawn for boot camps, track every step and heartbeat, yet we're more tired and sleep-deprived than ever. We exercise intensely for an hour, then sit for the remaining 15. We blast our bodies with high-intensity workouts at 8 p.m., then wonder why sleep won't come at 10. The Vikings would have found our approach to physical activity as bewildering as our sleeping habits. They didn't exercise, they lived. The archaeological evidence of exertion. When archaeologists examine Viking-age skeletons, they read stories written in bone. These tales speak of lives lived in constant motion, bodies shaped by daily demands that would break most modern humans. The skeleton of a 35-year-old male from Trelleborg, Denmark, tells a typical tale. His bones show pronounced muscle attachment sites on his arms, asymmetrical from years of rowing, thickened leg bones from walking and carrying heavy loads, compressed vertebrae from lifting and building, healed microfractures suggesting repeated stress and recovery. This wasn't a warrior or athlete. This was an ordinary farmer. His female contemporary from the same site shows equally impressive adaptations. Overdeveloped shoulder joints from grinding grain, strengthened core musculature from textile work, robust leg bones from walking and carrying. Children's skeletons reveal early integration into physical life. By age 7 or 8, bone development shows they were contributing meaningful labor, not harsh exploitation, but gradual integration into the physical rhythm of Viking life. These bones tell us something crucial. Viking bodies were tired at day's end, not the nervous exhaustion of modern information workers, but the deep physical fatigue that prepares bodies for restorative sleep. The rowing culture meditation in motion. If one activity defined Viking physical culture, it was rowing. From fishing boats to dragon ships, Norse life moved to the rhythm of oars through water. This wasn't mere transportation. It was a practice that shaped bodies and minds in ways perfectly suited for sleep. Consider the physical act of rowing, repetitive, rhythmic movement that induces meditative states, full body engagement requiring coordination and presence, sustained aerobic effort without excessive intensity, natural interval training as conditions changed, upper body pulling motions that modern life lacks. Archaeological experiments with reconstructed Viking ships reveal the extraordinary demands of Norse seafaring. A crew rowing a longship could maintain 5-6 knots for hours, each rower pulling their oar through thousands of cycles. This wasn't frantic effort, but sustained, rhythmic work, exactly the kind of exercise modern sleep researchers recommend. The psychological aspects of rowing were equally important. The coordination required for crew rowing created group synchrony, reducing individual stress while building collective rhythm. The repetitive motion, combined with the sound of oars in water and waves against hulls, induced states similar to what we now call flow, present moment awareness that naturally transitions to restful sleep. Einar the fisherman rises before dawn, not for a workout, but for work. He rows his small boat beyond the fjord, sets his nets, rows between locations, hauls heavy catches, rows home. By day's end, he's completed what modern fitness trackers would register as elite athlete training. But to him, it's simply Tuesday. Agricultural athletics, Viking farming required physical efforts that would challenge today's CrossFit champions. But unlike modern exercise, farm work provided varied, functional movements aligned with natural cycles. Plowing. Before horses were common for farm work, Vikings often pulled plows themselves or used oxen that required constant physical management. This combined sustained cardio with substantial resistance training. Harvesting. Cutting grain with hand scythes required rotational power, cardiovascular endurance, and precise movement patterns. A harvester might swing a scythe 10,000 times in a day, full-body movement that worked every muscle group. Threshing, beating grain to separate seeds, required explosive power repeated thousands of times. Modern studies of traditional threshing show energy expenditures exceeding those of competitive sports. Construction building. Viking structures required lifting, carrying, and precisely placing massive timbers. A single house raising might involve moving tons of material by hand. This work naturally periodized, intense during planting and harvest, lighter during winter. This variation, which modern athletes artificially create through training cycles, happened organically in Viking life. The warrior's way, combat as conditioning. While not all Vikings were warriors, martial training was common, especially among free men. This training provided unique physical challenges that complemented daily labor. Weapon practice. Swinging swords and axes developed explosive power and coordination. A Viking sword weighed 3 pounds, seemingly light, until you've swung it thousands of times in practice. Shield work. Viking shields weighed 20 pounds. Holding one at ready for extended periods built tremendous shoulder stability and core strength. Wrestling, Norse wrestling glima, was both sport and combat training. It provided intense anaerobic exercise while teaching body control and managing adrenaline skills that translated to better stress management and sleep. Running in armor training, in mail armor weighing 30 pounds, added resistance to every movement. This constant load-bearing built bone density and muscular endurance. Crucially, combat training typically occurred during daylight hours. Warriors learned to manage pre-battle anxiety and post-training adrenaline skills directly applicable to achieving restful sleep despite life stresses. Women's work. The unrecognized athletes. Viking women's daily activities demanded physical efforts, often exceeding men's in duration, if not intensity. Grinding grain. Using hand querns required sustained upper body effort. A woman might spend 2-3 hours daily grinding grain, equivalent to modern strength training, but with practical output. Textile production. From combing wool to working looms, textile work required fine motor control, postural endurance, and repetitive motions that built specific strength. Archaeological evidence shows many Viking women developed weavers' shoulders, overdeveloped musculature from years at the loom, dairy work, milking, churning butter, and making cheese required strength and endurance. Churning butter manually could take hours of sustained effort. Child-carrying Viking women carried children while working, adding 30 pounds of irregular weight to every activity. This functional training built core strength superior to any modern baby-wearing workout. Water hauling. Daily water needs required multiple trips carrying heavy vessels. This loaded carrying built the kind of functional strength modern trainers try to recreate with farmers' walks and suitcase carries. The natural gymnasium. Vikings transformed their entire environment into training apparatus. Hills and mountains. Daily life in Norway's terrain meant constant elevation changes. This natural interval training built cardiovascular capacity and leg strength. Forests gathering firewood, foraging, and hunting required navigation over uneven terrain while carrying loads. This built proprioception and stability modern humans develop only through dedicated balance training. Shorelines, working boats, gathering seaweed, and shore fishing required strength and balance on unstable surfaces, naturally developing core stability. Snow and ice winter movement required additional effort for every step. This seasonal resistance training built strength while maintaining cardiovascular fitness despite cold-limiting intense efforts, the rhythm of recovery. Unlike modern exercise culture's no pain, no gain mentality, Viking physical culture inherently included recovery. Seasonal variation. Winter's shorter days naturally reduced physical activity, allowing bodies to recover from summer's intense efforts. Weather-imposed rest storms and severe weather created forced rest days, preventing overtraining. Communal labor shared work meant individual efforts could be moderated based on capacity. The elderly and injured contributed within their abilities rather than being excluded. Celebration and rest. Feast days and religious observances provided regular breaks from labor. These weren't seen as laziness, but necessary rhythm. This natural periodization prevented the chronic overtraining that plagues modern athletes. Vikings got tired, recovered, and repeated the fundamental pattern that builds fitness without destroying health. The sleep laboratory of labor. Every aspect of Viking physical life prepared bodies for superior sleep. Timing. Most intense physical work occurred during daylight, allowing bodies to cool and calm before sleep. This natural pattern optimizes the temperature drop necessary for sleep onset. Duration daily activity lasted 8-12 hours, but at varied intensities. This sustained, moderate effort is ideal for promoting deep sleep without overstimulation. Type mixing strength, endurance, and skill work provided complete physical development without overemphasizing any system. This balance promotes overall health and sleep quality. Environment outdoor work ensured light exposure during activity, reinforcing circadian rhythms. Indoor evening crafts provided gentle movement without intense stimulation. Social context. Most physical work was communal, providing social bonding that reduced psychological stress, a major sleep disruptor. The missing ingredients. What Viking physical culture had that modern exercise lacks? Purpose beyond fitness. Every movement had practical purpose. This meaning-making reduced the psychological stress of needing to exercise while ensuring consistency. Integration with life. Physical activity wasn't separate from life, it was life. This eliminated the schedule stress of fitting in workouts. Natural progression children gradually increased physical capacity through play transitioning to work. This prevented injury while building lifelong movement patterns. Respect for limits. Injury or illness meant modified activity, not complete rest or pushing through pain. This wisdom prevented chronic issues that disrupt sleep. Community. Support physical challenges were shared, creating bonds rather than competition. This social aspect enhanced both motivation and recovery. The metabolic magic. Viking physical patterns created metabolic conditions ideal for sleep. Insulin sensitivity. Constant movement maintained excellent glucose control, preventing the blood sugar roller coasters that fragment modern sleep. Inflammation control. Regular movement without chronic overtraining kept inflammation low, crucial for sleep quality. Hormone optimization. Physical work patterns naturally supported healthy testosterone, growth hormone, and cortisol rhythms, all crucial for sleep. Mitochondrial health. Sustained daily activity built mitochondrial density, improving cellular energy production and recovery. Lessons for modern movers. The Viking approach to physical activity offers wisdom for improving modern sleep. Move throughout the day. Rather than intense, isolated workouts, integrate movement constantly. Work with circadian rhythms, intense efforts early. Gentle movement in evening. Find purposeful movement garden. Build, create movement with meaning, satisfies more than abstract exercise. Embrace seasonal variation. Let activity naturally ebb and flow with conditions. Prioritize recovery. Rest is not weakness, but wisdom move in nature. Outdoor activity provides benefits beyond mere movement, build community. Shared physical challenges create bonds that support overall well-being. The Vikings achieved something remarkable: lives of intense physical activity that enhanced rather than disrupted sleep. They proved that when movement is integrated into life rather than imposed upon it, the body naturally finds its way to restorative rest. Their secret wasn't in sets and reps, heart rate zones, or recovery supplements. It was in living physical lives aligned with natural rhythms, community needs, and environmental demands. They moved because life required it, and they slept deeply because their bodies had earned it. In our quest for better sleep, perhaps we need fewer sleep aids and more genuine physical fatigue. Not the nervous exhaustion of modern life, but the satisfying tiredness that comes from bodies used as they were designed, fully, purposefully, and in harmony with the natural world. Chapter 8. The Psychology of Peace. Viking Minds at Rest. When warriors slept like children. In our age of anxiety, where sleep aids constitute a multi-billion-dollar industry and sleep anxiety has become its own diagnosis, we might expect that Vikings living in an age of raiders, blood feuds, and genuine existential threats would have been even more troubled in their rest. The evidence suggests exactly the opposite. The Viking mind, shaped by a worldview profoundly different from our own, possessed psychological tools for achieving restful sleep that modern therapy is only beginning to rediscover. They lived with death at their shoulder, yet slept with the peace of those who had made friends with uncertainty. The saga of acceptance. Central to Viking psychology was the concept of weird Old Norse fate, destiny, the way things must be. This wasn't passive fatalism, but active acceptance, a philosophical framework that modern acceptance and commitment therapy attempts to recreate. Consider this passage from Havamal. Cattle die, kinsmen die. You yourself will also die, but the reputation never dies of one who has earned a good name. This wasn't morbid obsession, but liberating acceptance. When you truly accept that death is inevitable, not intellectually but in your bones, many anxieties lose their power. The Viking who lay down to sleep knew they might not wake, and this knowledge brought peace rather than terror. Modern sleep psychology recognizes that death anxiety underlies many sleep disorders. We lie awake fearing our mortality, disguising this fundamental terror as worry about work, relationships, or health. Vikings faced this fear directly, integrated it into their worldview, and thus defanged it. The evening ritual of mental clearing. The transition from day to night in Viking households followed patterns that modern sleep hygiene experts would recognize as ideal for psychological preparation for sleep. As darkness fell, the frenetic energy of daytime work naturally decreased. By firelight, activities shifted to those that calmed rather than stimulated the mind. Storytelling. The saga tradition served multiple psychological functions. Listening to familiar stories activated parasympathetic nervous responses. The narrative structure provided cognitive closure. Stories had beginnings, middles, and ends, unlike the open loops of modern life that keep minds racing. Handicrafts. Evening work like carving, spinning, or weaving required focused but not intense attention. This meditative activity naturally downregulated the nervous system while providing sense of accomplishment. Music and poetry. The Vikings valued skaldic poetry and music, often performed in evening hours. The rhythmic nature of these arts induced trance-like states conducive to sleep transition. Planning tomorrow. Unlike modern advice to avoid thinking about tomorrow's tasks, Vikings often discussed next day's work and evening, but this was collaborative planning that distributed responsibility, not solitary worrying. These activities weren't consciously designed as sleep preparation. They emerged naturally from the constraints of firelight and communal living. Yet, they created ideal psychological conditions for rest. The absence of choice paralysis. Modern life presents endless choices. Where to live, what to do, whom to marry, which of infinite entertainment options to consume. This freedom, research shows, creates anxiety that significantly disrupts sleep. Viking life offered far fewer choices. Your occupation was largely determined by birth. Marriage options were limited by geography and social status. Entertainment consisted of whatever stories, songs, or games your immediate community could provide. This limitation, rather than being oppressive, was psychologically liberating. When major life decisions are made by circumstance rather than choice, the mind doesn't waste energy on counterfactuals. The Viking farmer's son who became a farmer didn't lie awake wondering if he should have been a merchant. The path was clear, acceptance natural. The courage culture. Viking culture valorized courage above almost all other virtues. But this wasn't mere physical bravery. It was psychological courage to face whatever life brought. This cultural emphasis created remarkable psychological resilience. The sagas are full of characters facing death, disaster, or dishonor with equanimity. Gunnar of Hlitterendi, surrounded by enemies, sings as he fights his last battle. Grettir the Strong, outlawed and hunted, maintains humor and humanity despite isolation. These weren't just stories, but psychological templates. Children raised on such tales internalized models of facing adversity without being psychologically destroyed by it. When your cultural heroes face death singing, your own problems seem more manageable. This courage culture extended to emotional expression. Vikings weren't stoic in the modern sense. They wept, raged, celebrated with abandon. But they processed emotions fully rather than ruminating endlessly. A grief fully expressed moves toward resolution. Anxiety suppressed festers into insomnia. The social architecture of psychological safety. The communal nature of Viking life created psychological support systems that modern isolated living lacks. Mental health wasn't an individual responsibility, but a communal one. When Thorstein lost his son to illness, he didn't grieve alone in his bedroom. The entire household shared his pain, offered support, helped process the loss. When Astrid feared for her husband away on raids, other women who'd experienced the same fear provided comfort and practical wisdom. This constant social support prevented the rumination spirals that destroy modern sleep. Problems were immediately shared, processed collectively, and integrated into the community's ongoing story. No one lay awake feeling uniquely cursed or isolated in their struggles. Dreams as messages, not symptoms. The Viking approach to dreams differed radically from both modern psychological interpretation and medieval Christian suspicion. Dreams weren't symptoms of psychological states or potential demonic influences. They were messages, often prophetic, always meaningful. This positive association with dreaming created anticipation rather than anxiety about sleep. Where modern insomniacs often fear nightmares or night terrors, Vikings approach sleep hoping for guidance or warnings through dreams. The sagas contain numerous examples of prophetic dreams that warned of danger or provided guidance. Importantly, these dreams were shared and interpreted communally. A disturbing dream wasn't a private psychological problem, but communal information to be processed together. This reframing of disturbing dreams from pathology to potential wisdom reduced their power to create sleep anxiety. Even nightmares had value if they warned of real danger or provided psychological insight. The seasonal mind. Viking psychology naturally adapted to seasonal changes in ways that supported year-round mental health and sleep quality, rather than maintaining constant schedules and expectations. Norse culture embraced seasonal psychological rhythms. Winter was understood as a time of reduced activity, increased rest, and introspection. The sagas mentioned the winter sadness that could afflict people, but this was seen as natural response to darkness rather than pathology. Communities adapted with increased social time, storytelling, and acceptance of lower energy. Summer brought its own psychological profile, increased energy, ambition, and activity. The manic edge that constant daylight can bring was channeled into productive work rather than seen as problematic. This seasonal acceptance prevented the psychological stress of trying to maintain constant mood and energy. Vikings didn't expect to feel the same in December as July, and this expectation alignment reduced anxiety and improved sleep quality year-round. Honor, shame, and sleep. The Viking honor culture, while sometimes brutal, provided clear psychological guidelines that may have actually improved sleep quality. When your culture has clear rules about right and wrong, and when